The recruitment station on Colony 7 was always busy, but today the line stretched around the entire building and into the dusty street. Men and women of all ages waited under the harsh twin suns, their faces showing a mixture of hope and fear. The Valdorian War had been going on for 8 long years now, and the Human Alliance was desperate for anyone who could hold a weapon and follow orders. Standing in the middle of this line was a girl who barely reached the chest of the adults around her. Her name was Kira Vance, and she was 12 years old. Her dark hair was cut short and practical, and her clothes were worn but clean. She held a piece of paper tightly in her small hands, her eyes fixed on the entrance to the recruitment office, with a determination that seemed strange on such a young face. The man behind her noticed her for the first time and laughed out loud. He tapped his friend on the shoulder and pointed at her. "Look at this. The Alliance must be truly desperate if they're letting children play soldier now." His friend joined in the laughter. "Go home, little girl. Ask your mother to pack you a lunch and send you to school. This is not a place for babies." Kira did not turn around. She did not respond. She had heard these words 100 times before, and she would probably hear them 100 times more. Words meant nothing to her anymore. Only actions mattered. The line moved slowly forward. An hour passed, then 2. The twin suns climbed higher in the sky, and the heat became almost unbearable. Several people left the line, unable to stand the wait any longer. But Kira remained still, her eyes never leaving the entrance. Her legs ached from standing, and her throat was dry from thirst, but she showed no sign of discomfort. Finally, she reached the front of the line. The recruitment officer was a tired-looking woman with gray hair and deep lines on her face. She had probably processed thousands of recruits over the years, and her eyes showed the weariness of someone who had seen too much death and loss. She looked up from her screen and saw Kira standing there. For a long moment, she simply stared, her expression unreadable. Then she sighed deeply and shook her head. "Child, you must be lost. The education center is 3 blocks to the east. This is the military recruitment station." "I know where I am," Kira said. Her voice was quiet but steady. "I am here to enlist." Quote. The officer blinked in surprise. Then she laughed, though there was no humor in it. "You cannot be serious. How old are you?" 10, 11, 12, Kira replied. 13 and 4 months. The minimum age for emergency enlistment is 12, with guardian consent or orphan status. I have orphan status. She placed her documents on the desk. "These are my identification papers. My orphan certification from the Colony 7 Social Services, and my school records showing I have completed all basic education requirements." The officer stared at the documents, then back at Kira. Behind them, the line was growing restless. People muttering and complaining about the delay. "This is not a game," the officer said slowly. "The Valdorians are not training dummies. They are 7 feet tall, have armored skin, and they have been killing humans for nearly a decade. Do you understand what you are asking for?" "I understand perfectly," Kira said. "I understand better than most people in this line. The Valdorians killed my parents when I was 6. They killed my older brother when I was 8. They killed my grandmother last year when they bombed the refugee camp where she was staying. I have no one left. I have nothing left, except the desire to fight back." The officer was silent for a long time. Something changed in her eyes as she looked at this small, serious girl standing before her. Perhaps she saw something of herself in those dark, determined eyes. Perhaps she simply recognized that some wounds were too deep to heal with kind words and safe choices. "You will need to pass the physical examination and the basic aptitude tests," she finally said. "The standards are the same for everyone, regardless of age. No special treatment." "I do not want special treatment," Kira said. "I want a chance." The officer stamped her documents and handed her a number. "Examination Hall 3. Down the corridor. Second door on the left. May the stars protect you, child." Caesar. Kira took the number and walked toward the examination hall. Behind her, she could hear the whispers and the mocking laughter from the people in line. She heard words like, "waste of time," and "she will be sent home crying within an hour." She ignored them all. The examination hall was a large room filled with testing equipment. About 30 other recruits were already there, most of them adults between 20 and 40 years old. When Kira walked in, all conversation stopped. Every eye turned to look at her. "What is this?" A large man with a shaved head demanded. He had muscles that looked like they were carved from stone, and scars covered his arms and neck. "Is this some kind of joke? Did someone bring their daughter to work today?" "I am a recruit," Kira said simply. "Same as you." The room exploded with laughter. People pointed at her, slapped their knees, wiped tears from their eyes. The large man walked toward her, his footsteps heavy on the metal floor. "Listen, little girl," he said, leaning down until his face was close to hers. "I have been fighting since before you were born. I have killed more Valdorians than you have had birthdays. You do not belong here. Go home before you get hurt." Kira looked up at him without fear. "If you have been fighting since before I was born, and the war is still going, then perhaps the Alliance needs different kinds of fighters. Perhaps the old ways are not working." The man's face turned red with anger. He raised his hand as if to strike her, but before he could move, a sharp voice cut through the room. "Attention! All recruits will stand in line for physical examination. Any fighting or aggressive behavior will result in immediate disqualification." The examiner was a tall woman in a medical uniform. She carried a tablet and looked at the assembled recruits with cold, professional eyes. The large man stepped back from Kira, but his glare promised that this was not over. The physical examination was brutal. Recruits had to run for 30 minutes without stopping, do as many push-ups and sit-ups as they could in 3 minutes each, lift weights, test their reflexes, and complete an obstacle course that included climbing, jumping, and crawling through tight spaces. Most people expected Kira to fail immediately. They expected her to collapse after the first few minutes of running, to give up when she saw the weights she was supposed to lift. They were wrong. Kira ran the entire 30 minutes without slowing down. Her pace was not fast, but it was steady and relentless. While larger recruits burned out their energy in the first 10 minutes and then struggled to finish, Kira kept the same speed from start to finish. Her breathing was controlled, her steps were efficient, and when the timer beeped to signal the end, she was still standing while 3 adults had dropped out. The push-ups and sit-ups were harder. Kira's numbers were lower than the adults, but she was not trying to compete with them. The minimum requirement was 30 push-ups and 40 sit-ups. Kira did 32 and 45. Not impressive by adult standards, but enough to pass. The weights were adjusted for body size, and here Kira surprised everyone again. Her strength relative to her weight was actually higher than most of the adults. Years of hard work in the refugee camps, carrying water and supplies, had built muscles that did not show on her small frame but were strong and resilient. But it was the obstacle course that truly shocked the observers. The course was designed for adult bodies, with walls to climb, ropes to swing across, tunnels to crawl through, and balance beams to cross. The large man from earlier completed it in 4 minutes and 12 seconds, the fastest time so far. He smirked at Kira as she approached the starting line. "Try not to break anything, little girl," he called out. Kira did not respond. When the signal sounded, she moved. She was faster than anyone expected. Her small size, which everyone had assumed was a weakness, became her greatest advantage. She slipped through the tunnels like water, while larger recruits had to squeeze and struggle. She ran across the balance beams without hesitation, her light weight and perfect balance making it look easy. The walls were challenging, but she found handholds that adult hands were too large to use, climbing with a speed and agility that left the observers speechless. Her final time was 3 minutes and 47 seconds, the fastest of all the recruits. The room was silent. The large man stared at her with his mouth open, unable to understand what he had just witnessed. The examiner checked her tablet twice, as if she could not believe the numbers. "Recruit Vance," she finally said, "your physical scores are acceptable. Please proceed to the aptitude testing room." Kira nodded and walked toward the door. As she passed the large man, she stopped and looked up at him. "Perhaps," she said quietly, "being small is not always a weakness. Perhaps the Valdorians have spent 8 years learning how to fight large humans with large weapons. Perhaps they are not prepared for something different." She walked away, leaving him standing there in stunned silence. The aptitude tests were conducted in a smaller room with computer terminals. Recruits were tested on strategic thinking, pattern recognition, reaction time, and emotional stability under stress. The tests included simulated combat scenarios where recruits had to make quick decisions that would affect the survival of their virtual squadmates. Kira sat at her terminal and focused completely on the screen. The simulated scenarios were brutal. Enemy forces attacking from multiple directions, limited ammunition and supplies, squadmates who were injured or panicking. Every decision had consequences, and the computer tracked not just whether the recruit won or lost, but how they won or lost. Most recruits approached the scenarios like games. They tried to kill as many enemies as possible, to be the hero, to prove their personal bravery. They won some scenarios and lost others, their scores averaging out to acceptable levels. Kira took a different approach. She did not try to be a hero. She tried to keep her squad alive. In one scenario, her squad was pinned down by enemy fire with no way to escape. Most recruits chose to lead a desperate charge, hoping to break through. Most of them died, along with their entire squad. Kira chose to sacrifice the simulation of herself. She ordered her squad to fall back while she provided covering fire, drawing the enemy attention. Her character died, but her entire squad survived to complete the mission. The computer registered this as an unusual result. The examiner came over to watch as Kira completed the remaining scenarios. In another scenario, Kira's squad discovered enemy soldiers who had surrendered. Most recruits either ignored them or executed them to prevent any risk of betrayal. Kira ordered them to be bound and left with supplies until Alliance forces could collect them. When the examiner asked why she made this choice, Kira replied, "Dead enemies cannot tell us their army's plans. Live prisoners can. Information wins wars, not just bullets." Her total aptitude score was the highest the examiner had ever recorded. Not because Kira was the best fighter, but because she thought differently. She saw patterns that others missed. She considered options that others never thought of. She made decisions based on strategy rather than emotion. By the end of the day, Kira Vance had officially become the youngest recruit in Colony 7's military history. She was assigned to Basic Training Unit 17, scheduled to begin the following week. The other recruits who had mocked her that morning either looked at her with new respect or avoided her entirely, unsure how to feel about a child who had outperformed most of them. As Kira left the recruitment station that evening, the tired officer who had processed her application stopped her at the door. "I saw your test results," she said. "I have been working here for 15 years. I have never seen scores like yours. Not from anyone. Certainly not from someone your age. Where did you learn to think like that?" Kira was silent for a moment. Then she said, "When I was 6, I watched my parents die. I could not stop it. I was too small, too weak, too young. But I watched. And I learned. I learned how the Valdorians fight. I learned how they think. I learned their patterns. Every attack I survived, every refugee camp I lived in, every death I witnessed, I learned something. I have been preparing for this moment for 6 years. I did not have a choice about whether the war would touch my life, but I have a choice about how I will respond." The officer looked at her for a long time. Then she reached out and put her hand on Kira's shoulder. "Basic training will be hard," she said. "The instructors will try to break you. The other recruits will try to prove they are better than a child. You will face challenges that would break most adults. Are you sure you are ready for this?" Kira looked up at her with eyes that had seen too much for someone so young. Eyes that held pain and loss and determination in equal measure. "I have been ready," she said, "since the day I became the only one left." She walked out into the evening, where the twin suns were setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. Somewhere out there, beyond the stars, the Valdorian Empire was preparing for another year of war. They had no idea that their greatest enemy would not be a general or a battleship or a superweapon. Their greatest enemy was a 12-year-old girl who had nothing left to lose and everything to prove. Basic Training Unit 17 was located in a massive facility carved into the side of a mountain. The building was cold, gray, and designed to strip away any comfort or softness from its occupants. Recruits slept in metal bunks arranged in long rows, ate simple food in a noisy mess hall, and spent every waking hour being pushed to their physical and mental limits. Kira arrived on the first day with 47 other recruits. She was given a uniform that was too large for her, boots that had to be stuffed with extra socks to fit, and a bunk in the corner of the sleeping quarters. The other recruits looked at her with a mixture of curiosity and contempt. Word had spread about the child who had somehow passed the entrance examinations, and opinions were strongly divided about whether she belonged there. The training sergeant was a man named Corin Hayes. He was 53 years old, had served in the military for 30 years, and had the kind of face that looked like it had never smiled in its entire life. His eyes were pale blue and cold as ice, and when he walked into the training hall on that first morning, every recruit fell silent instantly. Sergeant Hayes walked slowly down the line of recruits, looking at each one with an expression of complete disappointment. He stopped in front of the largest recruit, a woman nearly 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders and a fierce expression. "Name," he demanded. "Recruit Solon, sir. Helena Solon." "Why are you here, Recruit Solon?" "To fight the Valdorians, sir. To defend humanity." Sergeant Hayes nodded slowly. Then he moved to the next recruit, and the next, asking the same questions, receiving similar answers. Finally, he reached Kira at the end of the line. He stopped and looked down at her for a long moment. His expression did not change, but something flickered in his cold eyes. "Name," he said. "Recruit Vance, sir." "Kira Vance." "Why are you here, Recruit Vance?" Kira met his gaze without flinching. "To win the war, sir." A ripple of surprised laughter went through the other recruits. Sergeant Hayes raised his hand, and the laughter died instantly. "Not to fight?" he asked. "Not to defend? Not to serve?" "Fighting, defending, and serving are methods, sir," Kira replied. "Winning is the objective. I am here because I intend for humanity to win this war, and I believe I can contribute to that outcome." Sergeant Hayes stared at her for what felt like an eternity. Then he turned to face the entire group. "This," he said, pointing at Kira without looking at her, "is a child. She is 12 years old. She weighs less than some of your weapons will weigh. She cannot reach the top shelf of the equipment locker without standing on a box. And yet she has already demonstrated more understanding of military purpose in one sentence than most of you will develop in your entire careers." The recruits shifted uncomfortably. No one had expected the terrifying Sergeant Hayes to say anything positive about the child they had all dismissed as a joke. "The purpose of war is not fighting," Hayes continued. "The purpose of war is winning. Every bullet, every battle, every death must serve that purpose. If you fight 100 battles and win them all but lose the war, you have failed. If you fight no battles but achieve victory, you have succeeded. Remember that lesson. It is the only one that truly matters." He turned and walked toward the training hall doors. 10-kilometer run. Full gear. Anyone who falls behind does the run again. Move. The weeks that followed were the hardest of Kira's life. Every day began before dawn with physical training that pushed her body to its limits. Running, climbing, fighting, crawling through mud and obstacles until her muscles screamed for rest. Then came weapons training. Learning to handle every type of firearm and blade the Alliance used. Then tactical classes. Studying battle formations, enemy weaknesses, communication protocols. Then more physical training, because Sergeant Hayes believed that a tired soldier was a vulnerable soldier. Kira struggled. She could not deny that. Her body was still growing, still developing, and it simply could not keep up with the adults around her in raw physical contests. She was always the last to finish the running exercises, always the one who needed 3 attempts to complete the climbing wall, always the one who was knocked down first in hand-to-hand combat practice. The other recruits noticed. Some of them felt sorry for her and tried to help when they could, but most of them saw her as a liability, a weak link that would get them all killed in real combat. They did not hesitate to tell her so. "Why do you not just quit?" a recruit named Marcus asked her one night. He was sitting across from her in the mess hall, his face showing genuine confusion. "No one would blame you. You are just a kid. You have your whole life ahead of you." Kira looked up from her food. Her body ached from the day's training, and she was so tired she could barely keep her eyes open. But her voice was steady when she answered. "I will tell you a story," she said. "When I was 6 years old, the Valdorians attacked my home colony. My father hid me in a storage container behind our house. He told me to stay quiet no matter what I heard. Then he went to find my mother and brother. She paused, her eyes distant, remembering. I heard everything. The screaming. The weapons fire. The sound my father made when he died. I stayed in that container for 3 days. Too afraid to move. Surrounded by the smell of smoke and death. When the Alliance soldiers finally found me, I was so dehydrated, I could not speak. They told me I was lucky to be alive. Marcus had stopped eating. Everyone at the table was listening now. I do not feel lucky, Kira continued. I feel like I survived when everyone I loved did not. I feel like I owe them something. I cannot bring them back. I cannot change the past, but I can make sure their deaths were not meaningless. I can fight until the Valdorians are defeated, until no other child has to hide in a container and listen to their family die. That is why I am here. That is why I will not quit. Quitting means their deaths meant nothing. I refuse to accept that. The table was silent. Marcus looked down at his food, unable to meet her eyes. From that night forward, things began to change. The mockery did not stop entirely, but it became less frequent. Some recruits began to see Kira not as a liability, but as a symbol. A reminder of why they were fighting. If a child could endure this training, could refuse to give up no matter how hard things got, then what excuse did the adults have? Sergeant Hayes noticed the change. He noticed everything, and though his expression remained as cold and hard as ever, he began to modify his training methods in subtle ways. Not to make things easier for Kira, but to give her opportunities to demonstrate her true strengths. Today we practice squad tactics, he announced one morning, 6 weeks into training. You will be divided into 8 teams of 6. Each team will compete against the others in a simulated combat exercise. Victory goes to the team that completes the objective while suffering the fewest casualties. The recruits lined up to be assigned to teams. When Kira was placed with 5 others, including Helena, Solan, and Marcus, the team's reaction was mixed. Helena looked annoyed, clearly expecting Kira to drag them down. Marcus seemed uncertain but willing to give her a chance. I will be team leader, Helena announced immediately. Anyone disagree? No one spoke. Helena was the largest and strongest recruit, and she had been dominating the physical training exercises since day 1. It seemed natural that she would lead. Good, Helena said. Now, here is the plan. We hit fast and hard. Maximum aggression. The other teams will expect us to be careful because of the casualty rules, so we surprise them with overwhelming force. Kira raised her hand. What? Helena snapped. I have a question about the objective, Kira said. What exactly are we supposed to accomplish in this exercise? Helena frowned. It does not matter. Kill the enemy, win the fight. That is always the objective. The sergeant said the objective would be announced at the start of the exercise. Kira pointed out. We are planning a strategy without knowing what we need to achieve. That seems risky. Helena stepped closer, using her height to loom over Kira. Are you questioning my leadership, child? I am questioning the strategy, Kira replied calmly. Leadership and strategy are different things. You can be a good leader with a bad strategy, or a bad leader with a good strategy. But the best outcome comes from good leadership, combined with good strategy. For a moment, it looked like Helena might hit her. But before anything could happen, the signal sounded for the exercise to begin. The teams were placed in different starting positions in a large indoor arena. The space was filled with obstacles, walls, buildings, and other features that created a complex battlefield. Sergeant Hayes's voice echoed through the speakers. Objective: retrieve the data chip from the central tower and return it to your starting position. First team to complete the objective wins. Any team member who is hit by simulation fire is considered a casualty and must stop participating. Begin. Helena immediately charged toward the central tower, expecting her team to follow. 3 of the team members ran after her. Marcus hesitated, looking at Kira. What do you think? He asked. Kira had been studying the arena layout during the announcement. Her eyes moved quickly, calculating distances and angles. The central tower is the obvious target, she said. All teams will converge there. Helena's aggressive approach will put us in direct conflict with multiple teams simultaneously. We have 6 people. They have 36 combined. The odds are not good. So what do? We do not go to the tower. Not directly. We let the other teams fight each other, while we find a different path. Marcus looked uncertain. But Helena said to follow her strategy. Helena is about to become a casualty, Kira said simply. Look. She pointed to where Helena and her 3 followers had reached the edge of the central area. 2 other teams had arrived from different directions, and a firefight had erupted. Within 30 seconds, Helena was hit by simulation fire and eliminated. 2 of her followers fell moments later. Now we have 2 options, Kira continued. We can try to save the remaining team member, or we can use the distraction to complete the objective ourselves. What do you choose? Marcus stared at her. You planned this. You knew this would happen. I guessed, Kira admitted. War is about probabilities, not certainties. Now choose quickly. We are running out of time. Complete the objective, Marcus decided. That is what we are here for. Kira nodded. Good. Follow me. Stay low. Do not fire unless absolutely necessary. She led Marcus through a series of side passages that avoided the main fighting areas. Her small size allowed her to move through spaces that larger people would have struggled with. She had memorized the arena layout in the few seconds she had to observe it, and she used that knowledge to navigate around enemy teams without being detected. The central tower was chaos. 4 teams were fighting each other in a brutal crossfire. Bodies of eliminated recruits lay everywhere, their simulation vests flashing red to indicate they were casualties. No one noticed the 2 small figures approaching from an unexpected angle. The data chip is on the top level, Kira whispered. I will go up. You cover the entrance. If anyone comes, do not engage. Just warn me. And hide. You are going alone? Marcus asked. I am the smallest target, and I can climb faster than you. She was already moving before he could argue. Kira reached the tower and began climbing. Her hands found grips that seemed impossible, her body pressing close to the structure to minimize her visibility. The sounds of battle covered the small noises she made. She reached the top in under a minute. The data chip was sitting on a pedestal in the center of a small platform. Kira grabbed it and tucked it into her vest. Then she looked down at the fighting below. 6 teams had converged on the tower. Dozens of recruits were engaged in combat, too focused on each other to notice the small figure above them. It was exactly the kind of chaos she had predicted. She climbed down even faster than she had climbed up. Marcus was waiting where she had left him, his eyes wide with disbelief. You got it? Kira held up the chip. Now we go back. Same route. Same rules. Do not engage anyone. They made it back to their starting position without firing a single shot. When they arrived, Sergeant Hayes was waiting. His expression was unreadable, but something in his eyes looked almost like approval. Team 5 completes the objective, he announced over the speakers. Exercise ends. The arena fell silent. Surviving recruits looked around in confusion, then turned to see Kira and Marcus standing at the starting position. Helena, eliminated early in the exercise, stared at them with an expression that mixed anger, humiliation, and something that might have been respect. Later that evening, Sergeant Hayes called the entire unit together for a debriefing. Today's exercise was designed to teach you one lesson, he said. The objective matters more than the fight. Team 5 accomplished the mission with 0 casualties because they understood this. Every other team focused on combat, on proving their strength, on defeating opponents. They forgot why they were fighting in the first place. He looked directly at Kira. Recruit Vance, explain your strategy to the unit. Kira stood up. Every eye was on her, but she showed no nervousness. The strategy was simple, she said. I watched the arena and realized that all teams would likely converge on the central tower. This would create confusion and conflict. Instead of joining that conflict, we avoided it. We let other teams eliminate each other while we found an alternative path to the objective. We used stealth instead of force, patience instead of aggression. We completed the mission because we never forgot that completing the mission was the only thing that mattered. Helena stood up. Her face was red with embarrassment. You abandoned your team leader. You disobeyed orders. I did not abandon anyone. Kira replied calmly. You abandoned the team when you charged into an obvious trap without waiting to assess the situation. Leadership is not about going first. It is about making decisions that give your team the best chance of success. Your decision gave us the best chance of failure. I made a different choice. The room was tense. Everyone expected Helena to explode, to demand satisfaction, to challenge Kira to some kind of confrontation. Instead, Helena was silent for a long moment. Then she sat down. She is right, Helena said quietly. I was thinking about glory, not victory. That was a mistake. Sergeant Hayes nodded slowly. Good. Learning from failure is the mark of a true soldier. Recruit Vance. From this point forward, you will serve as tactical advisor for all squad exercises. You will not lead directly, but you will provide strategic input to team leaders. Is that understood? Yes, sir, Kira said. Dismissed. As the recruits filed out of the hall, Marcus fell into step beside Kira. That was incredible, he said. How did you learn to think like that? Ow. Kira looked up at him. I told you before. I watched, and I learned. The Valdorians killed everyone I loved because we were not prepared, because we did not think strategically. I promised myself I would never make that mistake. I would always think first, act second. I would always remember the objective. Marcus shook his head in wonder. You know, when you first arrived, I thought you were just a scared little kid who did not belong here. I was wrong. You might be the most dangerous person in this entire unit. Kira did not smile, but something softened in her eyes. I hope you are right, she said. Because the Valdorians are not going to be defeated by ordinary soldiers using ordinary tactics. They have been winning this war for 8 years. To beat them, we need to think differently. We need to become something they have never faced before. She walked on toward the sleeping quarters, leaving Marcus standing in the corridor, wondering what kind of soldier this strange child would become, and whether she might actually be capable of changing the entire course of the war. 2 years passed. Kira Vance was now 14 years old. Though she seemed older, her face had lost the softness of childhood, replaced by the sharp, focused expression of someone who had seen combat and survived. She had grown taller, though she was still small compared to most soldiers. Her body was lean and strong, trained to peak efficiency. But her greatest weapon remained her mind. She had served in 17 combat operations since completing basic training. In every operation, her unit had achieved its objectives with the lowest casualty rates in the Alliance military. Word had spread through the ranks about the young tactical genius who could see patterns in chaos, who could predict enemy movements before they happened, who could turn impossible situations into victories. The other soldiers no longer mocked her for her age. They respected her. Some of them even feared her, not because she was physically intimidating, but because she understood war in a way that veteran commanders could not explain. She seemed to know what the Valdorians would do before they knew themselves. But the war was not going well. Despite small victories like those Kira's unit achieved, the overall situation was deteriorating. The Valdorians had launched a massive offensive across 3 star systems, capturing colony after colony, pushing the human forces back toward the core worlds. The Alliance High Command was desperate, throwing resources at the problem without any coherent strategy. It was in this atmosphere of crisis that Kira received orders to report to Strategic Command Headquarters on Earth. The headquarters was a massive underground facility, protected by layers of armor and defensive systems. Kira had never been to Earth before, and she spent her first few minutes simply looking at the blue sky and green trees through the entrance windows, marveling at a world she had only seen in pictures. Then she was escorted to a conference room, where she found herself facing the highest-ranking officers in the Alliance military. Admiral Chen, the commander of all Alliance forces, General Morrison, head of ground operations, Director Vasquez, chief of intelligence, and a dozen other officers whose names and titles she did not recognize. They all looked at her with the same expression. Skepticism mixed with desperate hope. Admiral Chen spoke first. Lieutenant Vance, do you know why you are here? Kira had been promoted to lieutenant 6 months ago, the youngest officer in Alliance history. No, sir. I was only told to report immediately. We have a problem, Chen said. The Valdorians have established a major base on Kepler 442b, a strategic position that allows them to threaten our supply lines to the outer colonies. We have attempted 3 assaults on this base. All 3 have failed with significant casualties. Our analysts cannot determine why. The Valdorians seem to predict our every move. He pressed a button, and a holographic display appeared, showing the planet and the enemy base. We have assembled our best strategic minds to develop a new assault plan, Chen continued. They have been working for 3 weeks. Yesterday, something unusual happened. During a simulation exercise, one of our analysts ran your combat records through a predictive model. The model suggested that your tactical patterns might succeed where conventional approaches have failed. Kira studied the holographic display, her mind already processing the information. May I see the previous assault plans? 2. Director Vasquez pushed a data tablet toward her. These are classified at the highest level. Everything you see in this room must remain confidential. Kira took the tablet and began scrolling through the plans. The room was silent as she read, every eye watching her small figure bent over the screen. After 20 minutes, she looked up. I understand why these plans failed, she said. General Morrison leaned forward. Explain. All 3 plans assume the Valdorians think like humans, Kira said. They use human military logic to predict Valdorian responses. But Valdorians are not humans. Their society is structured differently. Their values are different. Their concept of victory is different. She stood and walked to the holographic display. Humans value individual survival and minimize casualties. Valdorians value collective achievement and consider individual death acceptable if it serves the greater purpose. Humans attack weak points to minimize resistance. Valdorians deliberately reinforce weak points to draw human attacks into traps. She pointed at specific locations on the display. In the first assault, our forces attacked what appeared to be a poorly defended sector. It was a trap. The Valdorians had hidden reserves that counterattacked and destroyed our landing force. In the second assault, we used overwhelming force against the main entrance. The Valdorians retreated, drawing our forces deep into the base, then collapsed the tunnels to trap them. In the third assault, we tried a subtle approach with small infiltration teams. The Valdorians detected them immediately because their sensor systems are not designed like ours. They see movement patterns, not just heat signatures. Admiral Chen's expression had changed from skepticism to intense interest. You learned all this from our combat reports? I learned this from 8 years of studying Valdorian behavior, Kira replied. Every attack I survived, every battle I observed, every report I could access. I have been building a model of how Valdorians think since I was 6 years old. It is the only way I know to fight them. Then tell us, Chen said. How do we take this base? Kira was quiet for a moment, organizing her thoughts. Then she spoke. The Valdorians on Kepler 442b are commanded by a war leader named Thresh. He is one of their most respected strategists, known for his patience and his ability to predict human tactics. He has studied us, just as I have studied them. He knows how we think. How does that help us? Morrison demanded. It helps because Thresh expects us to attack like humans, Kira said. He has prepared defenses against human tactics, but he has never faced a human who attacks like a Valdorian. Dell. She manipulated the holographic display, bringing up new information. Valdorians value sacrifice. They believe that the greatest honor is to die achieving a meaningful objective. Thresh will expect us to try to minimize our losses, to fight carefully, to protect our soldiers. He will not expect us to sacrifice a significant force as a deliberate distraction. The room stirred uncomfortably. Admiral Chen raised his hand for silence. Continue, he said. I propose a 2-phase assault, Kira explained. In the first phase, we launch an attack that appears to be our main force. We use older ships, volunteer crews, and we attack with the aggressive tactics Thresh expects. He will commit his reserves to destroy this force, believing it to be our primary assault. You are suggesting we send soldiers to die as a distraction? Morrison interrupted, his voice harsh. I am suggesting we ask for volunteers who understand the risk and believe in the mission, Kira replied evenly. Valdorians volunteer for sacrifice missions all the time. It is part of their culture. Perhaps it should be part of ours too, when the stakes are high enough. She continued before anyone could object further. While Thresh is focused on destroying the decoy force, the second phase begins. Our actual main force, smaller but highly trained, approaches from an unexpected vector. Not from space, but from the surface. We land on the far side of the planet and approach the base overland, using terrain to hide our movements. That would take weeks, Vasquez pointed out. It would take 11 days, Kira corrected. I have studied the terrain. There is a route through the mountain ranges that Valdorian sensors cannot penetrate. The base has no defenses on the landward side because Thresh believes no human force would have the patience or discipline for such an approach. She pointed to the base structure. We enter through the geothermal vents on the eastern side. The Valdorians use these vents for power generation, so they cannot seal them completely. A small force can infiltrate, reach the command center, and disable the base's defensive systems. Once the defenses are down, our fleet engages the remaining enemy ships while ground forces secure the facility. Admiral Chen studied the display for a long time. This plan requires precise timing, extensive preparation, and soldiers willing to die for a distraction. It is risky. All war is risky, Kira said. The question is whether the risk serves the objective. 3 conventional assaults have failed. A 4th will fail too. The only way to beat Thresh is to think like him, to use his expectations against him, to do what he believes humans are incapable of doing. There was a long silence. Then General Morrison spoke. She is right. We cannot keep doing the same thing and expecting different results. We need a new approach. Director Vasquez nodded slowly. The intelligence supports her analysis of Valdorian thinking patterns. Everything she said about Thresh is consistent with our psychological profiles. Admiral Chen looked around the room, reading the expressions of his senior officers. Then he turned back to Kira. If we approve this plan, he said, who do you recommend to lead the operation? Kira did not hesitate. I will lead it. The room exploded with objections. She was too young. She was too inexperienced. She was too valuable to risk in a dangerous operation. The complaints came from every direction, overlapping and contradicting each other. But before Kira could respond, a new voice cut through the noise. I disagree with all of these objections. Everyone turned to see who had spoken. In the back of the room, a door had opened, and a Valdorian officer was standing there. He was tall and gray-skinned, with the distinctive bone ridges that marked his species. He wore the uniform of a prisoner, and Alliance guards flanked him on either side. Admiral Chen's face went pale. What is the meaning of this? Why is there a Valdorian prisoner in a strategic planning session? Director Vasquez stepped forward. Admiral, this is Commander Krath. He defected to our side 6 months ago, and he has been providing us with intelligence about Valdorian operations. I asked him to observe this meeting and offer his perspective. The Valdorian walked forward, his movements slow and deliberate. When he reached the holographic display, he stopped and looked at Kira. You are the one called Vance, he said. His voice was deep and rough, the human words awkward in his mouth. My people have a name for you. They call you the Ghost Child. Soldiers tell stories about you to frighten each other. Kira met his eyes without fear. What kind of stories? Stories about a human who does not fight like a human. A human who predicts Valdorian movements, who turns Valdorian tactics against themselves. Some believe you are not real, that you are propaganda created by your military to boost morale. Others believe you are something supernatural, a spirit of vengeance from the humans we have killed. He turned to face the assembled officers. I have reviewed this plan. It is brilliant. It uses Valdorian logic against Valdorians. Thresh will never expect it, because it requires the kind of sacrifice and patience that humans do not usually show. Only someone who truly understands my people could have created it. His gaze returned to Kira. And only the one who created it should lead it. Your commanders worry about your age. They worry about your experience. But age and experience did not save their previous assaults. Understanding did. This child understands my people better than any adult in this room. That is why she should command. Admiral Chen looked like he had swallowed something unpleasant. You are suggesting we put a 14-year-old in command of a critical military operation based on the recommendation of an enemy defector? I am suggesting, Krath replied, that you stop thinking like humans and start thinking like winners. My people have been defeating you for 8 years because you fight the way we expect. She does not. She is your best chance of victory. Use her or lose her. The choice is yours. The vote was held an hour later. It was not unanimous, but the majority supported Kira's appointment as operational commander. She was given 3 weeks to prepare, full access to resources, and authority over all forces assigned to the mission. 3 weeks later, the assault on Kepler 442b began. The decoy fleet attacked exactly as planned. 30 ships, crewed by volunteers who understood they were unlikely to survive, launched a direct assault on the Valdorian orbital defenses. Thresh responded exactly as Kira predicted, committing his reserves to destroy what he believed was the human main force. While the space battle raged, Kira led her ground team on the 11-day trek across the planet's surface. They moved through mountain passes and underground rivers, avoiding all Valdorian sensors, sleeping in shifts, eating cold rations, never making fires or using communication devices that could be detected. On the 11th day, they reached the eastern geothermal vents. The infiltration was the most dangerous part of the mission. Kira went first, using her small size to navigate the narrow passages where adult soldiers struggled. She disabled 3 Valdorian sentries personally, using techniques she had developed specifically for fighting opponents larger and stronger than herself. By the time Thresh realized what was happening, it was too late. Kira's team reached the command center and disabled the base's defensive systems. The Alliance fleet, waiting at the edge of the system, immediately launched its attack. Without defensive support, the Valdorian ships were overwhelmed. Without their command structure, the ground forces fell into disarray. The battle was over in 6 hours. When Kira walked out of the captured base, she found Admiral Chen waiting for her. His face showed a complex mixture of emotions: relief, respect, and something that might have been awe. The base is secured, Kira reported. Casualties on our ground team were minimal. The decoy fleet suffered heavy losses as expected, but most crews were rescued before their ships were destroyed. Thresh himself was captured attempting to flee. He is being held for interrogation. Chen nodded slowly. The brass back on Earth is already calling this the turning point of the war. They want to promote you. They want to make you a symbol. I do not want to be a symbol, Kira said. I want to win the war. Then what do you want? Kira looked up at the alien sky, where Alliance ships were establishing orbit around the captured planet. I want to keep fighting. There are more bases, more enemy positions, more opportunities. This victory proves that my methods work. Let me keep using them. Chen was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Do you know what Thresh said when we captured him? He said he had spent years preparing defenses against human tactics. He said he never expected to face a human who thought like a Valdorian. He said you are the most dangerous enemy his people have ever faced." Kira finally allowed herself a small smile. Good. I want them to be afraid. I want them to lie awake at night, wondering what I will do next. I want them to feel what I felt when I was 6 years old, hiding in a container, listening to my family die. Fear is a weapon, too. It is time the Valdorians learned what that feels like. She walked toward the transport that would take her to the flagship, already planning the next operation. Behind her, soldiers who had mocked her age, who had doubted her abilities, who had thought she was just a child playing soldier, watched her go with expressions of profound respect. The ghost child had proven herself, and the war had finally begun to turn. 6 months later, Kira Vance was promoted to commander. 2 years after that, she was the youngest general in Alliance history. Under her leadership, the tide of the war shifted dramatically. Colony after colony was recaptured. Valdorian offensives were predicted and countered. The enemy began to retreat for the first time in a decade. But Kira never forgot where she started. She never forgot the container where she hid as a child, the voices of her family dying, the promise she made to herself in the darkness. She never forgot that she had been mocked, dismissed, underestimated at every turn, and she never forgot that the ones who underestimated her had been wrong. In the end, the war that humans had been losing for years was won by a soldier who was different from all the others. Not bigger, not stronger, not more experienced. Just smarter. Just more determined. Just more willing to think in ways that no one else would consider. They had mocked her for her age. They had laughed at the child who wanted to fight. But when the enemy named her commander of their nightmares, when Valdorian soldiers spoke her name in fearful whispers, when the entire course of a galactic war changed because of her strategies, no one was laughing anymore. Kira Vance, the Ghost Child, the youngest general in human history, had proven that the measure of a warrior was not in their size or their years. It was in their mind. It was in their heart. It was in their absolute refusal to give up. No matter what anyone said, no matter how impossible the odds seemed, and that was something no one could ever mock again.